Oh, we could Uber, I mean, either way.
Who do you think she is the most fun teacher, probably?
I do get that a little lot,
Yes.
but I'm fun until you cross the line.
That's always good.
Do you have anybody on Zoom there, Rachel?
Yes.
I can see. As you say, I can see.
All us old people trying to read the school.
I also can't.
Hello.
Usually.
I know how I guess. Whoa. Okay. I can't see. I gotta let that move with it.
Guys, I highlighted them.
Good, you want one? You sure? Yeah. Okay.
For you.
Thanks.
Should we go ahead and get started?
No, somebody just walked in.
What?
Oh, somebody just walked in.
Oh.
Right
There she is. Miss America.
One more day. They have one more day.
Yeah, I work across the pond, so
Change, cross it.
I was just over there for dentist appointments, traffic was terrible. Yep.
Okay, now we're ready to get going here. Let's call the meeting to order. Rachel, will you do roll call, please?
Richard Worthout,
Here.
Scott Reese,
Here.
Danny Ricker,
Here.
Anna Mulder,
Here.
Sarah McLean, here, Heidi Klum.
Here. Great, we have a quorum. Let's see, any comments on the May 13th minutes?
Yeah, so Jamie emailed me and I was kind of confused about it as well. Can someone clarify, and I can go back and listen to about what the phases were for harbor review? We kind of went back and forth.
That was my question too, because there's a comment in there about,
Where's the sidewalk?
I know
Right, that's one of the things we talked about.
I
is
think
the walking
phase
path.
3 was the
I think it was
sidewalk.
three.
Yeah, that's-
I think
Sidewalk.
instead of telescope, it just should say sidewalk.
Sidewalks, okay.
yeah, I agree.
Okay, so 3 sidewalks and then. What else do I?
Do we want to add the telescope then to number, I guess that would be 5 now to the
Or
discourse.
I can just say.
Can it just
discovery
be part of
station.
4? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
telescope,
So
yeah.
3 sidewalks and then 4. It's boundary. Okay, thank you. Sorry, that's all I had.
Anything else?
Accessible access, does that just mean that means the walkway to the pavilion, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And the trees, if I remember it, those are from Shea, is that?
I think we ended up with 2 from Shea. With the thought being, tree board is hoping to do a relief program.
Okay.
This fall, which is where, sponsored by, I think, DT. They come and we like. 10 trees.
Okay.
We thought that'd be a great. location for that. Anything else? Anybody like to make a motion?
To approve with those suggestions or the clarifications on the Harborview site plan.
Okay.
All those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion passes. Great, board communication system, Rachel.
Yeah, I don't remember if I put it in the director's packet, but if I didn't, the Shea Locomotive is having a ribbon cutting at 4 p.m. this upcoming Friday. And then there is an event at the Historical Society afterwards, where someone's gonna kind of talk about the locomotive, Shea, the history, and all that. So you are obviously all welcome to attend. Staff's just gonna do a quick little insert. Thank you to the Historical Society for the addition to the park. At 4 p.m. this Friday at the park.
Are you allowed to ask who would like to donate further?
Probably not. I'm probably gonna leave this about the ribbon cutting and leave it at that. But I thought there's a way to phrase it where it's, we do have future plans for the park.
We're so excited about the
Investigating
landscape.
Yeah, so.
Great.
Is there gonna be signs produced?
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that'll be from the Historical Society. Yep.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, not us.
Do you need your mics on, Rachel, or is it pretty good?
Probably put them on. Just so it's in practice for using them.
Let's see, any public comments for anything that is not on the agenda tonight? Yes,
Hi, thanks,
Hi.
Dana. Tiff Easterwood, just outside the city. I was wondering if we had an update or progress on the, our favorite topic, the flagpole garden in Lower Zorn. Like, I was just wondering, are we gonna dig ground this year? Are they having plans? Like what? You know what I mean? Like, where are we at with that?
yeah,
So, some of the plans got held up in the ice storm in spring, but the garden club last, I spoke to them, which was about a week and a half ago. But they were gonna subcontract, digging out the space for the garden, and their plan was to install the garden this year.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Rachel. Sub out the what?
They're gonna subcontract out, the city will not be doing it, the garden club will be paying for someone to come and dig out the space for the
Oh,
garden.
you dig out, that's what I didn't hear.
Yeah, to, install the garden to get this stuff.
Sweet, thank you,
Mhm.
appreciate it.
I think they're hoping to get it established this year and then next year is their anniversary.
Right, I think that was in the original thing to get it all blooming by next year. That's it.
Anything else?
Yes. I'll just say, it's not part of the garden, but, you know, I've done some research. And there is a historical plaque from 2018 that the Legion owns, you know, about the flagpole. And I contacted the Legion because I've had such good feedback from the other plaques that have been renovated. And, you know, hopefully, we'll be able to have this beautiful plaque from 2000.
Do they have it?
Well, it's not sure yet. Yesterday, there was a new commander installed and he said, okay, but I don't know if he really understood the question. But, you know, there's a plaque I mean, it's there. I have the photographs of it.
I had that too,
Yeah.
and Rachel did reach out to Lucas and I think Legion too, and nobody knows where it is.
Yeah,
It's somewhere.
yeah, I mean, it's not that long ago, 2018.
Suppose if we knew it was on it, we could recreate it.
Yeah, you can see what's on it in the photograph. Yep. So I think that would be a great thing because I've received so many positive feedbacks from the plaques at Zorn.
They turned out so good.
Yeah, they did a great job, and so people love it and appreciate it and really think it's a great thing.
It's much more complicated than we all think. Let me tell you. Here's the real side of that.
So I'm gonna pursue the plaque situation and see what I can find out.
Right, and I'll reach back out to Lucas and we can scour DPW one more time.
Okay, anything else? Should we move on to new business, designation for July Parks and Rec?
I apologize, someone took the mouse out of here and I'm horrible at using the pad. So I apologize in advance. Just go very slow.
You're not alone in that.
Otherwise, you're almost there. Yeah, otherwise I'm gonna like go through the entire thing. Okay, so the National Parks and Recreation Association is working for communities around the country to designate July as Parks and Recreation Month. There are multiple communities already in the state of Michigan that have promoted this within their communities. Some do, you know, special giveaways each month, or they have a special event. There are a lot of different ways they can do it. So the idea was to bring this to the Parks Board to make a recommendation to council. For them to then fill in this document and proclaim July as the official Parks and Recreation Month, which is very fitting for our city, I feel. So.
Will we do anything with it from there? Put a little note in the newspaper or have
Yeah, we could put something in the
our
Harbor
flag
Light.
somewhere?
Yeah. We could bring it the Harbor Light, put something in. Oh, write a nice little article about, you know, how it came to be, information about the national, association, and parks and some of the history, and then why we chose to do it.
Good.
Good.
That's great. I move that we pass this along to council for their approval to designate July as Parks and Rec month.
Second it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That was a quick one.
I like easy ones.
Yeah, love those. Hopefully we have, and the next one might be kind of easy.
Anyone said no, I was gonna use the eyeball. No, I'm just kidding. Wait, Larry, what?
Rachel, you want to give us some background on the recognition plaque that will be going in Shells Park?
Yeah, of course. So city council has approved the addition of a plaque to recognize Wilma and Elmer Hannah in Child's Park. Now, when we look at Child's Park, we see it as a full parcel. The land that was deeded is a 65-foot piece of property, approximately from that willow tree to the day dock, if you can picture that. I outlined it horribly in our map. The city council has asked the Parks and Recreation Board and staff to recommend a placement for this plaque on the property. The family has agreed to cover the cost of installation. They're gonna cover the cost of the plaque and the cost of installation. Staff is proposing using an existing boulder in the park. You can see the picture in your packet. It has a flat surface already on one side, which DPW could shine up and make a little nicer to attach the plaque to. And then I attached some maps. These are proposed locations within that area. I'm open to other suggestions. I know it's not very clear on the map. One is specifically by that willow tree, kind of down where that beach area is. And then the other location, if you're looking at the water, would be to the right near the day dock. So they're all within that 65-foot span. Again, open to other suggestions. Those were just the two that popped out to Lucas and I.
And actually, Rachel and I met with the garden
Yeah.
club down there after that. And after you left, there was one more that came up. If you look up towards the sidewalk, you know, you were saying that, well, if we put a boulder up by the sidewalk where somebody actually would have a chance to see it and be able to read it, that they would be happy to put some flowers around it so it doesn't seem just random. So
There's
that
a
would
light
be
there,
like-
right?
What?
Oh, I was just checking. There's a light on the
I have a
sidewalk.
better view, that's the overhead view, but I think this one gives you a better vision of what
Yeah.
it would.
Do you wanna try and point to where that is, Rachel? So, the park side of the sidewalk by the right hand,
I can try to. Right, I'm going to the right side,
went to the right side.
okay. Here,
I don't see the
Along-
cursor.
you can't see the cursor,
Do you
yeah,
wanna point?
yeah,
Gotcha.
thank you.
Tell me where.
Right there.
Right there?
Well, yep, so, yeah, somewhere in there, yep. So the thought just being that, you know, that. I'm not even sure you'd see a boulder with a plaque down by the willow. And kind of the same thing with the day dock.
So you're suggesting putting it on the corner there, on the grass, is that what you're saying?
It's not, yeah, it's not really a corner, well, it's a property
Well,
corner.
I'm sorry, the corner of the red mark and the sidewalk.
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
along the sidewalk there.
Yeah, and then just with some flowers around it to make it look like it was intentional.
I like that.
Excuse me, there's no sidewalk there though, where the red property boundary.
No, we're saying along the sidewalk on Bay Street, it would go along that sidewalk. The red markers are just showing the
That
area that
I
would
see what
be
you're
there,
saying.
yep. Yep, just because when you think it,
With the other stuff, it's a trip hazard. You put, like, it's just, again, we're right in the middle of open space. We're over.
Okay, that's not in the middle of open space. Towards the sidewalk is what we're talking about, right there at the edge of the sidewalk. Which would be good so that people walking by could see it.
If you're looking at it this way, you have a yard and that you wanna put a boulder.
Yeah, well,
we could also.
I see your point.
The day dock, the thought was, and again, we can talk more about along the sidewalk, that's okay. The willow tree, I agree with, Lucas and I went back and forth on that one. The day dock is fairly heavily used, maybe you could, the trash can to the other side. And then where that track is, have a boulder, we could still do the flowers, I like that idea, it brings, but that is a pretty heavily used dock. People walk out on it, kids go out to it, it's a pretty poppin' spot.
either way, so either on the sidewalk towards the day dock or on the sidewalk towards Bay Street.
Yeah.
What I prefer is that it's accessible that people could read
Right.
without having to walk out into the grass and go out
Yeah.
to, you know, because we want to try to make it as
agree.
accessible to as many people as we can, regardless of their ability to get there. So,
Yeah.
you
Other
know, there's
thoughts?
sidewalks already, we might as well use.
So let's eliminate the willow then and hearing, and then what do you think about the other two?
Did you say, did I hear you correctly? You can move that trash can that's in the corner, even though it's outside the red lines?
Correct, we would not put it next to a trash, we would move the trash can to.
But that
the other
space is an
side.
option.
Correct, wait, where?
You're talking about.
By the day dock, yeah, so, because we talked about that corner, but
Thought you were
that's
talking
not
about that.
within a deeded.
Yeah.
That's what I was questioning, okay.
That would have been a good spot.
Yeah, I was like, that's a no brainer, whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Trash can there.
Yeah, I was-
So I think
Yeah, we would flip them, put the trash receptacle on the other side and put the boulder right there on the side of that walking path leading to the day dock.
With
I
the,
think it'd get more views if it was on the sidewalk off of Bay.
Maybe I looked at the wrong boulder, but this isn't a boulder, right?
It's
This
not
is-
massive, no.
This is like a smaller.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I mean,
So
I
am I
guess
still
if
looking
putting
at the
wrong flowers around it, though, I was gonna say you don't want just like a rock this big and right.
but the garden club feels comfortable
Yeah, any of those.
with doing some decorative around them.
I guess the
We can
thought,
ask Lucas to, find us a better boulder too, I don't know.
yeah, we can look at different,
It may be kind of flat.
we've had pretty good luck with excavation companies, donating. Well, like the one from the skate park, that was a donated boulder. So the boulder can be larger or smaller. I'd like it to stay within the medium. I don't want anything like, I don't know if you guys have looked at the shade drain, that's a big boulder.
big one.
That's not going anywhere. Yeah.
I was like, am I visualizing the right boulder here?
Yeah.
What am I talking about? And now.
I would say skate park size somewhere around there is appropriate, so, yeah.
Should we recommend then that we go with a larger boulder? And we put it by the sidewalk, by the west property line, the Bay Street sidewalk by the west property line.
Sounds good. I mean, I personally prefer by the 2 hour dock. I just think it flows a little bit better, but either way, I'm just glad it's not under the willow.
Jamie,
I'm okay with either way.
sorry,
I'm okay with either one.
Dick?
It doesn't matter.
It's up to you, Scotty, where you want to put it.
It's my fault.
Well, your call.
It's all good.
Do you have a preference, Rachel?
I'm open to looking at it on this side of Bay. I do agree, I think it would flow better on the side of the day dock, but as long as the board doesn't mind either way, maybe we simply go down. And
Whatever
we,
looks good.
yeah, and we like, once we know the size of the boulder, cause that's gonna be moving pretty quick. And it may lend itself to us when we mark that off.
I think that's a
Okay,
good idea. Check out both spots
Yeah.
and see what we
It'd
like.
be kind of cool to have a garden down there too by the.
That was what
Bay
my
dock,
thought
kind of
was.
my thoughts, like a little
That'd
one,
be kind of.
but. So
Well,
that's kind of why I lean towards it too, because it's a little, that's like
Because
the
otherwise
pipe
you're-
comes out and it's a little, ugh.
Sketchy.
So
To
it
the
really,
point of making sure, you know, opening the green space and making sure it's open, I think is a good point. That
yeah,
keeping that.
Well, it might draw people down to the.
that was kind of my thoughts, the pipes down there, and we've always talked to you and I about how. Not the prettiest, and that would definitely lend itself to something down there.
Shall we try a motion, that says we would like to recommend that the plaque be put on a boulder that will be located by either the day dock or by the, Bay Street sidewalk on the west side.
Do we wanna ask the family? They're on Zoom,
Sorry,
the family's on Zoom.
Oh, should we take public
Oh,
comment
hi.
before we?
Hi, Steve.
how's that sound to you, Steve?
Good afternoon. You guys are doing a terrific job. Thank you for your consideration and all the effort that you're putting into this. The Garden Club, the board, city manager, city council, and of course, Rachel, you've been working on this now for almost a year, so thank you. So
Yes.
the
Yes.
placement, so I'm sorry, I talked over you. The placement, which is really interesting when you're talking there along the sidewalk, is their property that the house they lived in was immediately across the street. So this parcel actually came from the total property they owned, which was the address, and it's also on the plaque. So that's pretty neat the way you're thinking about it. So thank you. I think the other is that the plaque is supposed to be delivered next week, and I can get that to you later in the week if you want to use that as you're making your determination about boulder sizing. So with that, the family thanks you. This is quite an honor. And interestingly enough, this is the 90th anniversary of this deed swap for this property. And guess what the emblem is for the 90th anniversary?
Hold on a moment.
Oh, he can hear us?
No, I said if he can hear us. Hold
I
on.
think you had to have been able to hear us if we said, what do you think, Steve?
Yeah, what do you think? Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I should ask. What do you think the stone is for the 90th anniversary? You know, like you have a diamond.
Here, audio.
Great.
I don't know.
The stone, was that, did someone say paper? The stone is actually a stone. How about that?
There you go.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I did not hear a word you said. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to fix the audio and then I.
Okay. All right. Well, I can hear you fine. Let me know and I'm happy to
can you-
restate some of
can
the
you
things.
Repeat everything you said.
That's okay now if I can remember. But anyway, first of all, thank you to the park board for your time and entertaining this, the garden club, city manager, city council, and Rachel. Rachel's been working hard on this now for almost a year, so thank you. This is a tremendous, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
This is a tremendous recognition for Alma and Wilma Hanna. This is the 90th anniversary that this deed swap took place. And in terms of commenting on the placement, what you're talking about is spectacular. And the reason being is because they actually live in the house immediately across Bay Street from this property that was deeded. And it calls out that address on that plaque. So it'd be kind of neat to read the plaque and look up and say, oh, well, that was the house that this parcel was deeded from. So that's pretty cool. So thank you for that. As far as the size of the stone, the plaque's actually going to be delivered next week. And Rachel, I can get that to you later in the week. And you could have the plaque to use that if that would help in terms of stone selection and sizing. But in closing, so we can make that happen as well. So my last question was, and maybe you heard the answer to this, I said, this is the 90th anniversary of this deed swap. Do you know what the stone recognition is for 90th anniversaries?
No.
But it's out there.
It just so happens it's a stone. So how cool is that? Thank you so much for what you're doing here. Greatly appreciated, and it's a wonderful, wonderful recognition. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Did we have a motion, or do we want to craft one right now?
Your motion.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did we vote? Sorry.
We had-
Yeah, let's do roll call.
Oh, do you want to do roll call?
Yeah.
Okay.
We just break down who did what. Okay, Richard Swarthout,
Yes.
Scott Reese,
Yes,
Jenny Ritter.
Yes.
Dan Mulder.
Yes.
Sarah McLean. Yes. Patty Clark. Yes. Jamie Bucky. Yes. And that was for either position.
Yeah.
Either. place.
And for a larger boulder. And if I'm remembering right, I think the plaque is about the size of a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 8x12.
Okay. Great, that was pretty quick and easy.
Look at that.
Next, moving on to city events on public property policy review. That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
Rachel, do you wanna do us up on that one?
Yeah, if I can find it. Okay. City council is asked the Park and Rec board and staff review the policy for events on public property. The intent is to ensure we are offering wonderful events to our community by also managing and utilizing city services and resources effectively. The new policy would not alter already approved events by council or staff. It would take effect for all events approved after policy is approved by council. So after the Parks Board had a new policy in place for a recommendation to council, and then once council adopted that, whatever recommendation or the new policy, then it would go into effect. I have attached an Excel sheet, which kind of gives the outline of when I started in 2021, present, all the city events I could possibly find in every folder in my office. So that does not mean all these events went to council. These are just all the events that have been turned in since 2021. It should specify what was low impact, which were high impact, which one we charged fees for, which ones were nonprofit, and which ones were for profit. I can adjust that any way the board sees fit as this conversation goes on through meetings. There's more information you'd like to see.
I think this is really valuable. Thank you.
So
I wonder if you want to add under the title, this would be the 2025 update or something, just so we know your year.
perfect. So staff recommendation is for board to review current policy for other communities. I attach Petoskey, Charlevoix. I'd be more than happy to bring more to the board. And then board suggests any changes they would like to see or more information needed from staff to make a recommendation. I do have a request into Chief Knight and to Lucas Vanderdeer, head of DPW, on exactly how much staff time is used on events on public property. That's probably gonna take, I think I gave him like 2 or 3 weeks to get that back to me.
That'd be good.
There's also a lot of other things that go into events, that staff will look at, like porta johns and a bunch of other different things, storage for events, things like that.
Rachel, is
Yeah.
it that with that then that we at least recoup our costs?
That's up to the Parks Board.
Yeah.
So you could look at the policy a lot of different ways. It depends if you want to look at the policy as a whole. In which case, my recommendation would be we break it up as to what is high impact, what does low impact mean. Then the next section be fees, and then the next section be, I don't know, something else. So we can break it up so it's a little more, our conversations are more clear in our goals. But if we're looking at, if the board decides, you know, we're looking at recouping fees, then that's what we'll look at, but that's up to our board.
So for this meeting, a couple of things that I think, because we're not gonna come up with a fee structure. obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
So a couple of the things that I think maybe we could come up with at this meeting are, one, I'd like to hear from folks who use these applications and sort of, you know, what they like about them, what maybe could be improved, that sort of thing. I think that would be helpful. But then also Jamie and others who have thought about this a little bit more, what are the things that staff need to bring to us at the next meeting to make sure that we have in front of us so that we can give them some direction, I think, as to, you know, so they're just not out researching everything, but that they can bring us helpful information for the next steps, because I think a little direction probably would be helpful. So.
One thought that I had is, I think Victor actually researched 5 communities, is that right? So you've got a couple in here.
I did Charlotte Petoskey. I think he had Traverse City. I don't know what else he had on there.
It was
He
like,
had Gaylord, Boyne City, Traverse City, Petoskey, and Charlevoix, but it didn't have all of the fees. Some of them were just applications, and I think that it would be helpful if we could come up with some kind of chart of what we want to know from those other communities.
I mean, instead of 40 pages, yeah.
So that you can, you know exactly what you're looking for in those, instead of us having to go through 46 pages of other policies and applications.
Another important part is this is not about the application. Right, we're looking at the policy. So some of those, Jamie's right, I think if it's Petoskey's, the application is attached. But we're simply looking at, well, not simply, pretty in-depth, the policy of the events. I agree a chart is helpful. And I also agree with Danny that the more the board can give me of what they want to look at, the more precise, because it's summer for all these communities too. So they're gonna want very quick answers that they can respond to.
I think it'd be super helpful if we identified our goals related to this, like what are our goals to, like, is the main thing to recoup our costs? Or is it, do we want to, this is true.
No, I think, so maybe a first step though, I would like to know what our costs are.
Yeah.
So I think as we look, you know, when we look at low impact and high impact, like my guess is they vary, right? So like, I guess the 4th of July art show, probably more than American Legion writers, right? So what is what costs are we looking at so that we can kind of bucket those into, I don't know, groups? Because I think they're different, right? As far as what that might be. I'm interested in recouping, I'm interested in making sure we're not overextending ourselves. How about that?
Right.
I'm not necessarily, this is not a moneymaker. We're not trying to make,
Right.
you know, this isn't like maybe there are some that lend themselves to, particularly some of the private events that lend themselves to making, you know, sort of recouping some of the funds, or maybe helping to offset some of the other things. But I would like to know how much we're spending as, you know, for each of these events, because I think that would be.
I think also that may be helpful, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, so for instance, we don't allow for-profit events on public property. For instance, I'm gonna use Allie Hill's yoga class. This is an example, okay? So Saturday, she does her yoga class in Shea Park. It's donation based, and it has to be donation based. If it wasn't, it would not be allowed for our city property event. Now, saying that, we have Mark, who's up at the pickleball courts, who offers public clinics. People pay, they're to the public, and then he has private lessons in the afternoon. Now, we have a contract with Mark, and we take 15% of his profit. So that is a separate contract he has with Parks and Recreation in the city. It's not an event on city property. We do private events such as weddings, ceremonies, not receptions. They do their own setup. They can't drive on the park. There's no city services used. We do charge a fee. The park is also not closed to the public. I always tell them, if there's random people in your photos, I don't know what to tell you. You know, so that is what it is. And you can see we've done a couple of those.
So maybe another goal though would be consistency, like if we're,
Right.
if he's paying us 15%, are there other events where it would be nice to recoup 15%?
I'd like to see also, like I looked at Petoskey and Charlevoix's, and I think it's good that Victor looked into Traverse City and Gaylord, but we're not Traverse City and we're not bringing in numbers like that. And we don't have the capacity Traverse City does. So I'd like to see what closer communities to us are charging, like Charlevoix and Boyne City, that are similar size to us, just to see if we're way off base or not.
I think we're the only place that doesn't charge for
That's what I
anything.
figured.
And a lot of these other places also have paid parking, which helps
And we.
offset the cost, which we also don't have, and I don't wanna have that conversation. But at some point, we have to figure out if we want to continue to improve our infrastructure, how we're gonna pay for those things, and if we're just giving everything away, then we're never going to be able to take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
I also think that we need to figure out a policy of what needs an application and what doesn't, because like I was walking my dog the other day and the triathlon for the school was going on and 4 giant blocks were all closed to traffic, and that didn't come to the city council because it was a temporary closure, but it still takes away from the normal use of
So
the streets.
the city manager advised me when it comes to road closure specifically, when we get to events, that should all go to council, because road closures can be deemed by the city manager and Chief Knight. So yes, because like we have the farmer's market, which closes the road, so ultimately we are gonna be talking about road closures and what staff time that takes to do. But let me ask specifically on, like, if there's a road closure, can the Parks Board make a like and deem that it has, I just don't know how that works. Because I think Victor can close a road at any time.
I mean, I think that our policy says that a low impact event means that it does not affect the normal use of city property,
Right.
and streets are city
Yeah.
property, and if you're closing a street for 2 hours, that affects the normal use.
Yeah, but I agree, like, we have to figure out a system of not only what deems an application, what doesn't, but what deems going to council and what deems staff approval. Also, when we do have a fee, is it, and I'm just gonna say like an event in multiple parks on the same day, is it $50 a park? Is it $50 a day? If it's something that's a reoccurring event, is that fee $50 each time they hold that event? Is it 50, like, I know and I think a document of what we do now currently with a chart of what other communities do would be very helpful.
Right.
And it's no one's fault, but I'm sure a lot of you don't quite understand the system now, which would make sense.
And then I think the third column would be, once they get back to you with costs, what it's actually costing, and it's not $50. Right?
So I think, like, once we get, I do think those are good pieces of information to have. I think then the bigger discussion becomes, we want to be good partners with our other community partners. So that, that becomes sort of part of this conversation, right? So, I was talking earlier today about the 4th of July art show, right? So it's an expensive thing to happen, right? But the tax receipts for the 4th of July in Harbor Springs are pretty darn good. So so how do we make sure that we continue to be good partners with our other partners, with our community partners, to make sure they do that? And so I think if I had to put my thumb on the scale, I'd say, let's try to, if we're gonna recoup some costs, let's try to do that from some of our private side folks. And, let's try to find the balance then with our public sector, in our nonprofit side. Because I think there are some, we want to be good partners. That's part of the deal. They help us, we help them. I think that's important. So
Another thought I had too is, would it be good to do like a quick little spot survey on, what does the community think about their tax dollars being spent for these, events that are actually, good community events? Like, I would expect my tax dollars to be spent for that, in which case, do we want to go like too far and, charging them to recoup costs?
I don't think this is about making money. I think this is about, is there a point where we should draw a line and say, we are supporting too many things to the point that we're asking the taxpayers to pay more? Like, is there another way that we can
What if they don't
support some of
What
these
if
things?
the
And some of
taxpayers-
these events, although they are free to the public, there's still a monetary transaction, and where does that money go? If they want to come to council and say, this is where our money's going that we're taking in, that's a different story. But right now, nobody knows where the money for some of these things is going.
Is that our business though?
It is if we're giving them all of our services for free. I
I
think
think
that.
we're saying we're not gonna give the services for.
Well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
up to them, but if they wanna come to us and say, this is where our money goes, and council wants to give them an exception, then that's another story.
So I-
Like Charlevoix gives exceptions for certain events, but they also don't give exceptions if it's a fundraiser because there is a cost and it's for making money and that kind of stuff. And so like, there's a fine line of when we should give our services and when we can charge. But none of it's really to make revenue. It's all to cover our
That's a
costs.
policy thing.
So,
So far I'm hearing, when you're talking about the 5 points, right, or a couple points that we're looking at, how do we compare? It sounds like costs are coming up, the definition of what's a major event, high impact, low impact, like that definition seems to be different. You know, as we look at some of these different policies, so it sounds like that's another one that we're looking at.
Or just not enforced. That, maybe that's part of it, is it's not being enforced.
Well, we don't have much to it right
Right.
now, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
What are the other ones that we want to dive into? We've heard a lot of costs and then impacts
So what are
slash
they
major
again?
minor.
Sorry, Sarah.
Cost.
Well, I mean, do we need to get into the nitty gritty and decide like, is it $50 a part? Is it $50 a day? Is it?
Eventually.
Eventually, but that would be down the line.
Yeah. I think right now we just need more information before we start going into all those details and look at communities around us and then, you know, read over this stuff as a board and come back with our suggestions about what these definitions are and.
so I'd add to your list, the cost, the definition of high-low, I think is good. I think then that the sort of spreadsheet of, that sort of breaks down what are the key points of some of our surrounding communities, particularly the ones that are sort of more like us, to be honest. So, so that we can sort of see how we line up, compare to how they deal with some of this stuff. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then do you want to get definitive about certain parks versus other, like Petoskey's got
I like that they had different prices.
breakdowns
for-
on, yeah, and
tiers.
Charlevoix's got different breakdowns too. Is that something that you want us to look at, is how they?
That's up to you. Charlevoix does the same thing, and that's why Charlevoix's policy, I've read Charlevoix's policy a lot. And they basically leave it up to council. Every event comes in separately and goes to council, and they deem first season, first park, first the event, what the fee is going to be.
I think that's something we can decide as a board.
Right, I
Think that you would almost have to have like a checklist,
Yeah.
which would guide you to how much to charge, cause
Yeah.
if you just leave it open-ended, you know, people are gonna be like, well, you're charging
Right.
them and not charging us. And so if it was like a checklist that said, like, this is what it, depending on all of these things.
I don't know if it's Petoskey's or Charlevoix's, but I believe one of them also has the fee will be waived or like it'll be lighter. There's some arrangement where like if the Charlevoix Chamber does a big event, you know, I'll say Venetian Fest, sure, I don't know who throws it on. Venetian Fest, they go to city council every year and they say, we do this, but this is what we bring in for you. And then the council can make that decision based on the benefits of having so many people in town.
So a couple things that we're interested in,
Yeah.
is to add to your spreadsheet, then it sounds like the sort of idea of the tiers of the, of parks, you know, that could be something we could talk
Different
about,
size, yeah.
different sizes, different, you know, by the water maybe is more than.
Well, like
You know,
closing down
uh,
Marina Park for an event is different than like, we're gonna have a picnic at G
Kiwanis.
Party.
It's kind of similar. And so then also though, an idea of how do our surrounding communities, our peers handle this sort of idea of fairness, like everybody's treated the same, except for some goes and get exceptions from council, and you know, how do they deal with that? The issue of sort of fairness, do everybody's, is it a checklist that you go through and it leads you a certain way or not? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it'd be nice to know.
And then would it be appropriate for us to say, okay, you've got Boyne City, you've got Charlevoix, everyone takes a policy of a local area. We hit these 5 points, we report back, or send the information to Rachel, you can compile it. I don't know, what's the best route to move forward?
I'm okay either way. I know I'm personal friends with the Parks Director of Petoskey, so I can reach out to Kendall. I also know the parks, we're all in a group together. It's called Knuckles North. That's really cool. Yeah. So, and Boyne City, and I could be correct, I don't believe they have a Parks and Recreation Director. I think it's DPW. but they have to have someone.
They have a lot of policies and fees. They
Yeah.
charge for even using City Hall.
Right, so,
I like the idea of Rachel doing it just for network.
yeah.
I think
so-
it's great. So what if we though start with
Start
sort of
with,
the baseline information, we get it, and then if there's something we really want to drill down into, then perhaps we can like revise it.
Yeah.
Does that make some sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and at some point, we're gonna need to talk about like logistics, you know, like what are the rules, that kind of thing.
I think this is a good start.
Yeah.
If you're up for it, Rachel.
Yeah, I think gathering information is always the first step, otherwise we're not making informed decisions.
So just so I'm understanding, you're saying you're gonna connect with your network.
Yeah.
Your knuckles, yeah, your knuckles, yeah.
And I don't-
You're gonna ask them information about costs.
Yeah.
How they define major events, high impact, low impact, how they do that. You know, what are the key points in their policies? And then how do they break down specific policies within parks, whether it's by size, whether it's by a specific park, and then fairness.
Yeah.
I also added, what are the services provided mid-event? Like maybe they have a DPW that comes in mid-event and empties those trash cans. So I think that's a good thing to add, just maybe there's additional things they're doing for the event that we don't do.
And
So that
because
makes sense.
Bukowski's even broke down, like, do you want the speaker? Do you want the? stuff like that.
Kendall's on it.
Oh, yeah, girl.
Picnic tables, like.
So just services provided mid-event, or does that include services provided?
I have to say
And start
before,
set up
mid
and
and
zero.
after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
any services needed to put that event on outside of what the everyday expectation is.
And you're gonna create some type of visual for us to see how each of the
Yeah, chart, right,
stuff,
yeah.
or each of the boards does,
Yeah.
okay. And then report back to us in July, and then we take it to the next step.
Do you think you got all that, Rachel?
Yeah.
Feels like a decent start.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Before we go, Bonnie, is this way did you come to talk to us about the duck?
Not necessarily to talk, but to listen.
Okay.
And to answer questions if anyone had any questions.
Make sure.
Yep, just to listen. Thank you.
Do we need to take public comment or we, no, do we have anybody left on Zoom?
Nope.
Yeah.
Oh.
I just don't know, but nobody's hands raised, so. Okay. No, I feel like that's a great start.
Okay,
The more information we have, the better. And then we can, if we feel like we need to break it down further, we can, but that's a good start.
with the ultimate goal coming up with a package that we can recommend to council.
And just be prepared, this could take months
Yeah.
of meetings. This is not going to be, nor do
Well,
we
and
need
we
to rush
are.
it. Both the events for 2025 are in. So,
It's better to get it right, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it?
Good.
Let's move on to Kiwanis and I just had something I want to talk about before we get going. I've been thinking a lot about it and I'm so proud of all the stuff that we've accomplished at the parks. But I just feel like we've been a little out of sync with staff and the board. And I just really like to find a way for us to work better together. So here's my thoughts. In my mind, the kind of the conflict revolves around, it seems like staff is playing an increasing role in kind of controlling how the board operates, you know, from what goes into the packet, deliberations. Personally, I feel this hinders our effectiveness and our ability to make recommendations to council that are well thought out and, you know, sound. The example, and I guess this is really kind of what brought it home for me was this month's packet. So I believe you guys know by now that I believe in an approach where we like look at vision for the park, talk about what our goals are, and we identify alternatives and pros and cons, and we get public opinion. And I kind of feel like maybe this is where things went a little sideways with Kiwanis last year. You know, I feel like we kind of like rushed right to solutions without, you know, really getting it square in our mind. You know, what do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? So with that in mind, in front of you is what I had prepared for the packet this month. And it feels like there's a new policy now where you can submit something to Rachel to go in the packet, but she can decide if it gets used and how it gets used. So obviously it didn't get used. So now we have this kind of awkward situation where these are things that I think are important to talk about as the chair. But Rachel didn't think it was important to talk about. So I'm so excited we've gotten a second chance to look at alternatives and to do our process and alternatives, pros and cons and all that kind of good stuff, and to get public input. And I hate just to jump right to looking at solutions again. So hopefully you guys are okay with me going over this, but I just think it's kind of a conflict where the chair can't put something in the packet anymore. And I just want us to all work well together, and I would just love for us to find some way to find a way to make that happen without having conflict. So I don't know if it's just me thinking about these things, or what your thoughts are on it. And if everybody thinks, oh, well, it's no big deal to have two things to look at, or we don't want to even look at yours, this handout, then I guess I'll process that and do what I have to do. But do you guys have thoughts on that?
I guess my question is, what is protocol with other boards? Like, do other chairs present stuff for city council? And
Planning Commission does all the time.
okay,
Bill Mulder is always preparing like an education piece about density or about, property rights or whatever. And those-
DDA, all reports, but all of them have their own reports.
Yep, tree board, we do our own reports. I think maybe where this is coming from is, that isn't at all what happens at council, like Victor prepares the packet, and I don't think there's anybody on council that's interested in even putting anything in there.
There's a different role though.
Yeah,
I mean, we're an advisory board where we are supposed to discuss things and take it back to council, and council is a different beast.
and if Victor's preparing the packet, then
Yeah.
he's the staff member preparing the packet. So
Yeah.
if we're looking at our board, Rachel's the staff member preparing the packet, and
but what if there's something that, the chair is the one that prepares the agenda with staff input. Is how it's supposed to work, is my understanding.
But that's not
And
what
so-
happens with council. I understand.
Council
Like, for
is
example,
different. The council works with the mayor, but the mayor and the city man, the mayor basically just the agenda, and then council
he
approves.
says I don't want something on the agenda, which you did this week, so, and I don't want to get into that. I think Rachel and I have always, worked well in talking through, like, what should be on the agenda, and, oh yeah, we should put that on, or maybe that's better a different month. And I think that's all worked out great.
Thanks.
But I feel like, what's in the packet should represent the agenda. And I feel like if, like you guys, I feel a bunch of you have submitted stuff. You submitted something about, the survey.
Yeah, and I think
Scotty
Yeah.
put stuff in.
as I'm kind of reflecting over our time, or the time that I've had as part of the board, at one point, we had recognized that we have an agenda, but our conversations went so many different directions that our conversations, there's items on the agenda, we were pulling in all sorts of things that had nothing to do or got so sidetracked, we were not. And so, remember having a conversation as a board saying, okay, when we're going to do this, we're gonna try to make sure that we are all reeled in. We are paying attention to what the agenda items at hand, and if we wanted to, as a group, add additional items, we would say, Rachel, can you add that for next month for us to have, so we can have a deeper conversation? We can pull more information in. And so, I mean, just bringing that up is remembering a time in which we weren't as focused and weren't as productive. And I don't want to go back to that time of being not focused and not productive and just having all sorts of stuff, I guess brought up
I
without.
guess in this case, this is directly pertinent to our discussion.
But you're asking the broader question of bringing information, what is in the packet, what's not in the packet. I just don't want us to get too far.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this, part of the conversation, to your point too, I think, Sarah, is that, you know, we're a volunteer board. That like, we all have day jobs, we can get here as soon as we can and do this stuff. We don't have, you know, scads and scads of time to do a lot of stuff. So the more focused we can be, the more productive we can be. And just like we did for this last, when we were talking about the fees, right? So a stack of information about the fee stuff from all these cities is not super helpful for me. I looked through it and I'm kind of went, ah. And so like a more focus on how can we be helpful? How can staff help the board ultimately make good recommendations to the council? Because that's sort of our, you know, that's the way the role works, right? How do we, our job is to help them do their job. They've asked us about the fees, they're asking us about Kiwanis, you know, but we need the information to be able to do that. So how do we best work with staff to make sure that we have the information we need in a timely way? And I don't know how that works, and I don't know the right way, but I know that's our job, is to make sure that we are giving good advice that can.
Yeah.
So they don't have to spend all their time working.
Yeah, I think like information in the packet, because this is, you know, staff's day in, day out job all day, every day, should be concise and stick to the agenda items. And then as a board, we can ask for further information, further questions, all of that.
I think that before I was on parks, before I was on council, there was not an agenda, there was an agenda for all of these meetings, but there was never a packet. DDA didn't have a packet, parks didn't have a packet. Very few, there was nothing for you to think about beforehand, or if there was, it was just to the board members, not to the public. And now all of that is public. The more questions you can think about before the meeting, I think gives you a better way to come to the meeting prepared and be ready to discuss it if there are other ways you should be looking at something. So I think that there should be some sort of working together.
And in the past, there has been, you know, like we proofread each other's stuff and suggest edits and like, you know, it's worked out great, but this is such a departure for me to submit something that I want to talk about. This is what I want the board to see, and then to have it completely rejected.
How often does this happen? Does it happen once?
This is, I think, a new policy.
Under policy.
Well, yeah, I think Victor got involved. And has said that the Parks Director will take things that are submitted, but will decide if and how they get used. And for me, that's kind of a problem and takes our autonomy away. Like if I, as a chairperson, want to make sure we're discussing like the goals and have our goals changed and that kind of thing, but then staff is saying, no, we're not going to talk about that. So I guess, yeah, I guess this is all feels a little bit new within the last, I guess really this is the first meeting where this kind of thing's happened.
So I mean,
I just hate
it's good
to
to
see-
talk about it, yep, and then maybe how do we move forward, right? So similar to this conversation, I feel like if I would have had time to think about this beforehand, I would have maybe been able to have a little bit more both lens,
And
both
we don't have
sides.
to come to any resolution. We can
Right.
table it for today.
But I think
Mhm.
similar to, you know, bringing items and ideas up, as we talked about in the past, if that's something that, you know, you want to talk about, or we want to be talked about, but it's not just for the sake of time and for the sake of productivity, if it doesn't fit within, you know, the June meeting, could that then be something that's brought up? Hey, this is something I'd really like to talk about. Can we add that as an item to discuss in July? Is that something that works out then? Like,
I just feel like so much of this is background that we need to have in our minds, though, as we start to think about alternatives. I don't think we can effectively, you know, identify alternatives if we haven't like agreed on what our goals are.
Yeah, well,
It's just, that to me, that's best practice.
so I think there's a couple things that we can work on. How about that? And I
Yeah.
think maybe that's.
Yeah,
what
I
we-
would like to get this resolved in a
So I think we,
productive, friendly way.
Kiwanis Park has obviously. There's some issues around that we need to sort of wrap our arms around and figure out how to get a path forward for. But ultimately, I think what I'm hearing at least is that, we really do expect that the parks and staff work with our chair to help make these meetings successful and productive. That's the goal, right? Ultimately, that's what we're looking for. And so, and I have spent more time than I wanted to this week trying to figure out how to get moving on some of this stuff too, right? So
Yeah.
like, as long as we're at loggerheads, it's gonna be, we're
It's a
not,
distraction.
we're not gonna be able to be successful with, in doing what we do. So how we de-escalate that, I think is first step is how do we do that? Maybe we can get to a better spot. I think we need to work together to figure out what what that best practice looks like, because I don't know necessarily what it is. I think it's kind of in the middle, right? I think I'd like to have staff help a little bit more, but I like to make sure that it reflects where the committee wants to go, or what it needs. Again,
Yeah.
similar to what the discussion we just had on the fees, right? Like,
I agree with that. I think that what we just did with the fees, where as a board, we decided what information we wanted to see was really valuable. And I don't know, sometimes things don't carry over from meeting to meeting. Sometimes things are new. And so if we have to slow down and say, we're introducing this topic, what information do you want staff to investigate? And then we bring it back the next month to discuss further, then that's what.
And
Or if
this
it's
is-
time sensitive.
Or if it's
all
time
special
sensitive.
Meeting and we can go.
Yeah, but I think that what we just did with the fees, obviously that's not time sensitive, was really productive, and us as a board decided on those things. It wasn't.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and I feel like council is looking for recommendations from the board. Staff provides their own separate recommendations, when something is brought to the board, here's what the board recommends, and then there's a staff recommendation. So,
So are we supposed to be proposing to council what our decision is by their next meeting?
No.
I think having this given to us and it wasn't in the packet, I would personally like time to read this outside of the meeting, because I would need time to go through it and process it. And I know you spent
fairness,
time on
you
it.
didn't even get the packet till yesterday, but it was, this whole situation, if we can see the plans, which we do want to get to really quickly.
yeah, and I think maybe as we work through this, so this Kiwanis is a good case study, and maybe how we can start to work for it, right? So
Yeah.
we need more time to digest things, because this is not an easy thing
It's a big
to do with a big project, and we still don't quite have the information we probably really need to do a lot of the thinking about it, right? So like costs are still out there, which is a big driver for me, thinking about how much this stuff is cost, what are we gonna do with it, like. We need to walk through the master plan and how it lines up too, but there's a lot of big outstanding questions that we just don't have answers for yet. Now, I don't think council wants us to, I don't think there's a huge hurry currently. We've gotten a little bit of time from the foundation to make sure that they've given us a little bit of grace so that we can make some of these decisions. But this is a good example of how do we take a complicated issue? How do we work through it as volunteers? How do we help staff help us? And then ultimately, how do we help council?
Council doesn't meet again till July 21st, other than this coming Monday, so. We have another whole meeting, and I think that if we can direct this conversation kind of like we did the last one, with what information do we want Rachel to investigate? And how can we move forward, getting public input and getting all the information we need to make this decision?
And some of the things,
Is
yeah.
the conversation that I think we need to have today, not what plan we like, not what we want to do, what information do we want to be brought back to us in July.
May I please have 5 minutes to discuss the first two slides here? I just think it's so important for our discussion that we start with a common set of understandings about goals and what we want to do at the park.
Before we dive into that, I'm just wondering, Rachel, if in the future meeting you can bring back to us about what the policy is. And that doesn't have to be right now. You just mentioned a new policy. I would just like.
So it's not a policy. So what happened was, met with Victor for my year review, and the city manager's request that I make my board packets more specific, more informational, more detailed for the board to make informed decisions. I started working on the packet. I had my short Kiwanis, because we don't have all the information to us. Victor had asked in an email that Danny and Dana were both on, that we stick to the conversation to be about the building specifically and not the park as a whole. Dana then sent her presentation. I personally, as staff, felt it was confusing to have both. Victor had asked me to be more specific in my packets for staff. Dana's correct, tree board, she does do a lot of work with the tree board in that packet. It's up to staff, but ultimately the packet falls on staff. The agenda items fall along the chair and staff together. So I decided to create that boundary to enhance my professionalism and my work with the packets in a way where you all say, this is what we'd like to see in the packet, and this is what I'd like to see. And I had expressed to board members that they could print the materials and bring them to the meeting, and we could still ultimately go over them. So I understand both sides. I know it seems rash and sudden, and I definitely understand the feelings that are involved in it. But that's ultimately how it came to it.
Thanks for providing that.
I just think we need to find what the good balance is between staff and in the board.
Right, and to appreciate then what Rachel's saying, which is this is part of trying to grow in her position. And I think we need to make sure we give her feedback that, okay, like there are things we need to. And so it's a give and take between what Victor's asked you to do.
I'm sure we can work this out.
Right.
But shall we table it for now and talk about it?
I think we should
Next
talk
meeting.
about what information we want to be brought to us at the
Yes.
next meeting.
Okay, but can I have 5 minutes first? Is it okay with everybody? No?
No, that's fine.
In your handout, do you guys want a handout? I think I've got an extra one. You interested or? Thank you. So on page 2, so part of this too is Danny wasn't with us last year. When we talked about some of this stuff originally is we had like some pretty simple goals for the park as a whole. And in there, we have nothing about how does the building play into this? Is this something, is the building, important? Because it doesn't seem to be based on what the goals, master plans for the park are.
What is it? Does the rustic character bit have something to do with the building at all? I don't know. I just.
Yeah, it could. But do we want to add something in there about, have a presentable building, to be used, whatever. And we can talk more about this next week.
Yeah, I think it's.
So let's table that.
Sorry. I do think that first one though, recreation for all ages and abilities.
Yeah.
That to me has an impact on what does this building do? Passive and active recreation. I mean, all of these things have some impact on the building. It doesn't really say what the building looks like, but it does have,
Yeah,
what are we doing with it, right? Okay, sorry.
yeah, I don't know. None of this to me speaks directly to the building. That's something for us to think about whether we do want to add something that does relate to that. So I just stuck these into categories. I don't remember what we decided was most or less, more or less important. But just one thing that's come up that we may want to think about is, do we really want to put all of the grant funds into the building? Or do we want to look for a solution that leaves some funds available for some of the other things we'd like to do at the park?
I think in my perspective, a $500,000 into a building that is 50 years old is a lot of money.
Mhm.
I think that when we first started talking about Kiwanis Park and what we wanted to do there, And when we applied for the DNR grant, the focus wasn't on the building. And then it kind of turned to the building. And there's no doubt in our mind that we need to do something to the building. But if the rustic character is what it's about, can we do something minimal and make a bigger impact on somewhere else at the park? And I mean, I think that all of this needs to be discussed. We kind of, felt the pressure. Hey, we have $500,000, but there's a deadline, and we had that pressure. And now, like, maybe we can take a step back and we can look at all of
Is there
the
a way to better
possibilities.
use that money? Yeah,
And
to make it go further.
And that's, I think, my perspective, and kind of what I heard from council is that they just want to see the options, because when it was originally discussed, it was for $20,000 bathrooms, and we know that a bathroom isn't that. So I want to make sure that we're using this money in the best way possible and getting the most bang for the buck when it comes to this donation.
And that was my point. So then, goals for the building, which Rachel did outline in the presentation as well. One thing I want to put on the table is, do we really for sure need a deck space? Like, if that money would be best spent there, or is it more important to have a nice trail through the park or have a bigger place up for older kids? So just in the back of our minds as we're trying to look at some of these other options. And then the other thing that came up at the council meeting, I don't know that anybody was there, but Jamie and I was, oh, you were there. Okay.
That was,
Thank God. Yeah, okay. But a number of comments came up about, like, should we make one of the goals for the building to recognize the historical significance? So that could be arranged anywhere from, you have to save that building at all costs, to what can we take from that building that we could apply to, say, if we do go the direction of a modular or something like that.
I was a little surprised at the meeting, just in the feedback from the meeting. I was a little surprised about how some of the affinity for the building that was there, because I don't have a huge attachment to it. I'm you guys, but but there are people who do.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife learned to ski there, like on the tow rope at the building, and had a birthday party there. So people do for sure. And so I think we just need to be really cognizant and reflective of that, and understand that that's a big deal for people, and that's okay.
It is a big deal for some people. Jamie has said that she's talked to a bunch of people that, I'll let you tell, that really.
I don't think anyone wants to see us spend $500,000 on that building. If we can do it for 300, that's different.
Yes.
And put 200 towards something else, but I don't know that anyone wants us to put $500,000 into that building.
I think that was sort of the conversation that we had at the last meeting, which
Yeah.
was, man,
Let's see what we can do. with
let's see what we can do, because that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so, but you're right, Jamie, if the conversation is 250 or 300 to do what we want to do with it, well, that shifts the way we think about it, I think, a little bit too, right?
But we need that information.
But we don't know.
And I also think with lifelong residents in Harbor Springs that do have nostalgia for these buildings, I think we need more public input before we
Yeah,
make decisions too.
You're probably right.
Well, we had bannered around focus groups last time, and I think we all sort of lost track of it, but I think the sooner we get some public opinion, the better. But then it's a timing thing. Do we wait until we have like some alternatives fleshed out that they can react to? Or rather than just like having it so open-ended that they don't even
Know what the options
know
are.
what the options are.
I guess.
so I've done some research and have been in touch with some companies that do modular buildings. And we can create a building that when the public drives up to it, they won't realize that it's a new facility. That, it'll still have the same character of the historical building that's there until they go inside and they realize that, it has heat, it has electricity, it's up to code, and all the other things. So, I think that you
It
need
could
to
be
think
red.
about having it, the same red kind of color. Maybe there'll be a couple of windows or something on that part, but certainly we can provide the historical character of the building with a whole new, brand new building that's up to today's standards.
So maybe we say we do recognize the historic
Oh, yeah.
significance, whether,
Yes.
whether somewhere in that range.
You know, and
The
you can
building
put
or-
the crow hole sign up there and, you know, won't it look any different? Except that, you know, inside.
And
Would
in
it
the
be
options-
possible to get quotes on the different options? Because we know we have a couple different options, but I don't know if we're talking like option A is 500 and option B is 150. Like, I don't know what these differences are
We
gonna be.
won't technically know that until we put it out to bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I
We
think-
won't know specifics, but gosh, we gotta be able to get in the ballpark.
Some sort of
this stuff,
ballpark.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think we also have to establish criteria, like how many square feet. You
Can
know,
I-
at
can I
the
just-
council meeting, nobody really quite had it.
It just might be my brain, but I'm just a little confused about the direction of this conversation right now. Is our purpose right now, just to talk about the different things about Kiwanis? Is our purpose right now you went to council then gave permission for you to seek alternative options? Are we trying to come up with those options? I just I'm lost and I feel like.
Yeah,
are
what
we
is our
talking-
direction right now to make
what
this
is our
up to you?
goal?
Trying to do is confirm what our
It's-
vision is for the park and what our goals are for the building. And have any of those changed, like with this new historic thing?
Okay, so, sorry, and it just might be the time of the year. So we are trying to identify our vision for the park. We're trying to identify what the building options are. And then from looking at the agenda, you've got some ideas about next steps. Is that what is on there with the focus of the discussion? Like, I am just lost. I'm trying to recenter and figure out what is our goal right now with this?
I think we're just trying to circle back and kind of start from the beginning, like what's important. And
Okay,
then move into alternatives and what needs to be researched.
okay. So we are trying as a board right now to figure out what are our goals for the park
In the building.
and the building? And what are we as a board going to recommend to Rachel for next steps?
Yeah.
We chime in.
Yes, please.
I know, I'm very.
Sorry,
I'm very confused too.
Like we're talking.
Could happen, council gave permission to investigate other options for the building. I need you all to tell me what specifically you want me to investigate. Do you want me to investigate an entire new building? Do you want me to investigate a modular attached to the building that's there now? Do you want me to investigate a separate restroom building, an outdoor or one? And then, once we get those estimates, those will lend us to whether we can use funds in other areas of the park. I think it's probably premature to talk about playgrounds and things, although amazing, and we may be able to, but we don't know if we can have that discussion left. So to spend time discussing those, probably besides the point until we get those figures. I think focusing on the building is the best.
Yeah, but I think you need to have like what criteria we were looking for.
I agree, with the building.
So,
Then we'll know what money we may potentially have left over.
so
Okay.
my thought is if the historical building is something that is very important, do we want to have an option that is within the current footprint? Like, what would that be? Is it possible? We already have determined that we do want to know what a brand new building would be. I don't want to know anything about a modular attached to the new building or to the current building.
I don't like that option.
I would say like the current footprint and maybe a separate restroom facility is an option.
Yeah, that was
Mhm.
my thought was that, however it is, and I think language is important when we talk about modular. People sometimes think like double wide trailers, that kind of thing. I'm thinking about, is there, this building was a kit when it arrived. Is there a kit? Yeah, it was modular when it arrived. It arrived on the back of a truck and you put it up, that's what it was. It was a kit. Is there a similar kit now for like a you know, a 2-stall restroom that could be beside it, that's just kind of off the shelf, not custom, that could fit with this whole thing, right? That maybe saves some money. So I would be interested in that kind of going down that path, right? Are there ways for us to accomplish the goal, but maybe not have to start completely over?
So what I'm hearing, the different options that kind of keep getting tossed around is work within the current footprint.
Right.
Yes.
And current building.
Yes,
And what?
making some, the current building,
Mm.
making some changes and updates to the current building. And adding a modular bathroom or separate detached bathroom. And then option 3 would be totally new building, probably modular style because of our budget.
Yeah.
And just take those 3 items, look into them, come back with quotes, and then
Well, and then there's the 4th, which would be to take the current building and add bathrooms,
The Mark Boudet options,
That-
yeah.
the addition, yeah.
the addition, but not a modular addition.
Right.
A stick-built
Stick-built.
addition.
I
So
think-
4 options.
Yeah. I think we
Can I
need
repeat
more
those for
information
30?
on those 4 options.
So now I have follow-up questions, because I'm gonna do this, I'd like to only do it a couple times. If it's a new building, hypothetically, right? Well, those restrooms, do you want me to ask for pricing on those being indoor, outdoor access?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So I think we need to accomplish the same goal,
yeah,
right? Because the goal is we want some bathroom that people can use even if they haven't rented the building, right? So
but my question, like, do we still want pricing on a deck? Something that we could remove at a later date
It
if
could
it
be
wasn't?
like a line item.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
yeah, cause you could remove it at any day, like any date, and say that, well, that's
Yeah,
expensive and we can add a deck pretty much at any time.
I think our criteria
Stays the same.
stays the
Okay.
same. Bathrooms,
Perfect.
kitchenette, deck, new
Should we
windows.
say, so I think the way it works, and this came up at council was, when you're looking at manufactured buildings, you have floor plans, you find a floor plan you like, and you settle on the square footage. And they're very flexible about removing, adding, changing, interior walls kind of thing. So this is getting back to what size do we want? Do we have to figure out?
I
what-
think that's for the next time.
Okay, all right.
I
So-
think this is,
Baby steps.
I'll figure out what the square footage is with the storage that we don't necessarily need.
Yeah.
So,
But if you're gonna talk to a company, they're gonna ask you that
I
question.
mean,
I know, that's.
but if we're gonna do a modular, it's going to be similar in size to what is existing. Give or take.
So the criteria we have is we still want the kitchen, we still want the bathrooms with indoor, outdoor access. We want the electricity to work without 2 crack pots shutting it off,
Yeah.
right?
Ideally.
And we want some type of larger gathering space, whether that be adding something onto the front of the current building or the space is small.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the feedback has been, whether that's outdoor space or indoor space. Right? What else am I missing?
I think that
So
those,
we could start out with her looking into,
I think those 4 options.
Those 4 options.
looking into existing square footage, but let's say we find out that's only gonna be $200,000, then we could say, okay, let's make it bigger. So we have a
Well,
bigger
then, well,
gap.
then, yeah, we'll talk about that.
I think we
One
crossed
phase
that
one,
bridge.
two, three, we'll
Yeah.
get there. We've gotten real good at phases of like
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah.
Let's keep it going.
Phases.
But so I think what, to your point, the start is, let's start with figuring out what it would be to replace the current square footage building. If we were
Correct.
talking about
Footprint.
new, for the footprint, that'll give us an idea of what per square foot we're at.
Right?
Then we can think about, well, all right, but we've got a little bit to play with.
And how much does that cost, and could we go bigger?
That's
Yeah.
right, but we don't know right now any.
And then what are we saying we're doing then with the Mark Boudet plans with the additions?
Well, before we
That's
move
one
back, can we also hear what you have to say, Rachel, with what you prepared here?
I think we pretty well covered
We
it.
covered.
My,
Just don't want
really the
to.
point of my, like, thing was we focus on the building. We focus on what you all need to make a decision about the building. And then if we can open it up for further discussion, we do.
And are we in agreement that we wanna wait to get any public input till we have more information on these 4 options?
I think, that's what I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think.
I just wanna make sure we're all on the same page.
Because, so part of this is setting expectations for the public, right? We don't wanna like say, oh, well, look, you can have this big whatever, whatever. And then it comes back and it's $600,000, and we're like, oh, yeah, you can't, sorry.
Just kidding.
But just another option though would be, we've talked before about doing just little spot surveys on specific parks.
I don't think we're there yet, right? Like we could
Right.
come up with the ideas first or.
Cause she could come back and once would be like, oh, we can't even offer that.
Right, similar like our grand survey that we've done, you know, we got feedback from people, if they want a nice drink at Kiwanis, well. what's
Sorry,
the
we
cost?
can't.
Reality of that, that's great, so I guess we've got some impact for feedback. from
We
people.
know, and we know we're gonna spend money on the building, but hopefully not 500, so. And we'll go from there, but I think that those 4 options and getting some kind of ballpark is what we need, and the pros and cons to each of them.
I think we also like kind of talking about what Jamie's saying, once and we're not here yet, we don't have to discuss it. But looking at the estimate and then looking at bids on what bids come on versus estimates. The bid is going to be higher.
Mhm.
We could almost guarantee it. We need to leave some wiggle room to prepare for that. But I think we could do that by process of elimination, looking at other bids, things like that. So just know that we may, that's make a committed, you know, 350, and we think, oh, that's fantastic. I mean, that's what the bid's gonna come in at. So we have to be prepared.
So the 4 options, go back to the 4 options.
Yeah.
We've got an option where we want Rachel to investigate a new building with indoor and outdoor bathroom access. We have mentioned that we want Rachel to investigate an addition to the current building, similar to the Mark Boudet plans, right? We want Rachel to investigate the building with an outdoor modular bathroom.
Footprint with an outdoor bathroom.
Okay, so the current footprint, so keeping the building the same,
Yeah, we'll
ren-
have to do updates
renovating.
to it.
but the
Right.
outdoor bathroom instead of trying to create an indoor-outdoor bathroom. And then that only gets me to 3. What's our 4th?
I only have 3 too.
Renovating the current building.
Renovating the current building.
I have separate restroom facility, work within current footprint, an addition, and a new building.
Yeah, that's 4.
Which made it to 4, only because I'm gonna investigate that separate restroom buildings are totally separate. Just so we have all those figures no matter what.
And I think Rachel, what I'm hearing is we need to know sort of cost, I think is obviously a huge driver, but also just sort of like, are there timelines? I think time to me is also important, like
Yeah.
if we investigate something and it's not gonna arrive till 2029, well, that's not gonna work, right? So we need to understand
Yeah.
where the timing is for some of this stuff and when the construction might happen, so we can kind of understand what we're working with. Does that make sense for these options? So cost and timing?
Cost and timing, yep. And then eventually we can talk about like, what is the good and the bad of each of them.
Right.
On the renovate the current building one. I would just like to make sure that we have thoroughly investigated like the safety of that building. Like Lucas had mentioned, maybe there needs to be an electrical inspection. Like before we start putting money into it, like if we have to rip all that paneling off the walls and redo all the wiring, that's another kind of whole level altogether. Like how much longer do we have on the roof?
I think those are all pros and cons that each,
What will affect the cost?
yeah, I mean, but it will be pros and cons to each concept too.
Yeah. But would it be a deal killer if, you know, we found out something heinous about the building that we don't know?
Yeah, absolutely, that would be a lot of cons.
That'd be a lot, yeah, a lot of fun.
All right, what do you need from us next, Rachel? Do you need us to make a motion to investigate?
Consensus is fine, yeah. Staff is.
The timeline though, Rachel, we'd like those, we'd like those before the next meeting, so that we can really kind of look at them and dig into them, right? So as much as we can.
I have a couple companies already lined up to meet with them.
Okay.
I unfortunately can only go as fast as those companies allow me to with information. I wanna make sure when I bring it, it's in full, so we can look at it all together. In worst case, we can always schedule a special if need be.
I think the next step, all of it.
May I ask another just quick question? I guess maybe it won't be a quick question, but as we move forward, and I, again, might be just a space cadet, but when we talk about these master plans, the master goals of each of these parks. Those master goals live somewhere? Cause they're not laid out in our master plan.
Yeah, no, this came from, okay, the source and then. It came from a Parks Board meeting,
Okay.
but you know, Jamie's talked about this before, is maybe we need to have a binder for each park. Like,
Or
when
a
we-
folder that we could access.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Uh,
digitally and say,
digital,
oh, look
yeah.
at this was
I
here,
know.
so that when we come into a conversation about, you know, right now we're talking about Kiwanis, but if we come into a conversation about Child's Park, whatever it is, we have a point of reference. We can go back to, oh, we discussed
Digital
this
folders,
piece.
yeah.
I think that, I mean, digital or paper, whatever, I think that that is a really good point because like we talked about Harbor View last year and it was about making it a concert venue and, you know, like that should be in this folder. And now we've made a different master plan that's totally different and that is in the folder. And once we get ready to actually fund that project, we should relook at all of these concepts and say, okay.
Because there's going to be constant change in
Yeah.
our board itself. And I, you know, I say this all the time, I've learned so much about the city and about these parks because I've been on this board, but if I were to come in brand new and not have this, those
Don't know the
context,
master
or
plan.
not know where to find the information, I would feel pretty lost
be
and
really
it
good
feels like it's,
orientation.
right, or just
There-
feels like it's less productive that way, right?
And there is
Or-
also, like, it was different when there was no money for Kiwanis. At one point, it was, let's do what we can to,
We're broke.
yeah, we're broke, we don't have any money.
We can't dream these big dreams, we don't have any
And-
money.
I
But now-
listened to a meeting that Dana actually said, what happens if somebody gives us $500,000?
Mhm.
And then it happened, and so it's like, now we have to take a step back and say, okay, how can we make the most of this, and what is the best use of this?
And to come full circle then
Yeah.
too, hopefully that would then alleviate, you know, some of the stressors or the worries of who's got what idea moving forward. If we were able to all be able to connect with that. So, that's a
Could you
great
put
idea.
that on
Can
your
I
list?
add one more
Do
thing
this?
to your
Yeah.
list? I'm really sorry.
What'd you say?
Can you make sure to include ongoing maintenance costs to the different concepts and or like
Okay.
longevity of
Yeah.
the different concepts?
And then I guess that'd be another good question about the existing building, you know, how do you estimate the life of the building?
But that'll be a con.
Right.
We'll go forward from there.
Since you predicted the $500,000, do you have any lottery numbers or anything? Interested.
Okay, good conversation, guys. Anything else anybody wants to add on that, and then we'll come back to next month, with some exciting information. Want to talk any more about Mark's solution? Good, then shall we move over to the Shea locomotive article?
Chair Mulder wrote an article for Shea Park months ago, I believe, and then we had decided to wait until the locomotive was installed to put it out. There's a piece to go along with the installation to draw more attention to it. It's been installed, there's concrete around it, so now is the time to post the article. I wanted to put it in the Harbor Light originally, because we kind of already looked it over and decided that was the month. But Dana had came up with the idea of a donor folder. Kind of similar to the boardwalk, there's a plaque up there where people have names on it, so if they donated $1,000 or more, their name got on the plaque. I think this one's 100, or is it 1,000? Thousands, yeah, $1,000 or more, they would get on the folder. But that is another piece going into the puzzle of our plan. So we felt it best to bring it to the full board. So really, that's all you're discussing. Unless there's other comments or edits you have to the article, that's the only reason it's here.
So the article's not been published yet, we're
Correct.
moving forward. Okay,
I will send it tomorrow.
we're discussing whether or not we want a folder and a
Correct,
plaque.
yep, yeah, just basically the donation process. Everyone's on board with that, staff's on board with that. We're putting boulders everywhere, so.
Boulders all-
We got a lot of
Boulders, yeah.
But I can't make that decision, so.
People like their names
Yes, yeah.
And I think that with the boardwalk, there was like levels too. There was,
Well, it's 1,000 up and then it was people that, donate like 25,000 up, yeah. Not that they're all not special, they're all special.
Yeah.
But isn't that a historical society? Donations.
No, but we're donating for the landscaping and the walkway. So the boulder would have to go near like our signage, it wouldn't go near the local, yeah, we'd have to distinguish where it was placed. So it wasn't next to locomotive or close to the AHA.
Okay. It's not the people that donated to
Correct,
the
no.
locomotive, it's
Oh.
people who donate to the landscape.
Yeah.
I understand.
I think it's a good idea.
Boulder it up, man.
One more thought is, do we want to have like a little insert on, we're proud to announce, Parks and Recreation Month in July.
As long as it doesn't go, when they go to council Monday. Do you think they're gonna approve this?
hard to say, there's only 4 of us.
I would hate to put it on there and then they didn't rock.
Well, are you
Maybe
wait-
tap the brakes and make it its own separate thing.
You could wait until after,
But we can still do a separate article.
or you could send it over to Charles on Tuesday.
My only reservation on the article is item number 7, leaves option open for future considerations such as completion of ED walking loop in a waterworks themed play area.
I love that too.
That makes me think about a
Trigger.
splash pad.
That's
And
a
that's a trigger. Very polarized about that versus not. So if it can just say
Be more
a
vague.
child's play area
Yeah,
or a
okay.
historically themed play area, historically themed, you could.
We don't have to
hit on.
talk about.
Let's not go too crazy.
You wanna do that, Rachel, or you want me to make the change?
Do it. So vague for future plans, folders to go.
Historical themed.
And,
All that.
July is.
And
We'll do a separate article.
I think, or even just like an ad, if you're going to do an ad that says like, these are all of the upcoming activities we have planned for the summer that, and have the beginning of the ad be like, this is Parks and Rec month. And then have all of the
I was
activities.
kind of thinking end of July, we would do one like right in the first week of July to kickstart it, but we have to do either way, but.
I just don't want to take.
I'm still gonna note it down, though, so I'll forget.
July is the tree boards month, right? Alternate.
Yeah.
But it does have to be part of the Parks
I
and
don't
Water.
think we've been
I could see
very-
the Harbor Lake Watch like be a bigger article about programming and things like that, so.
Then after that, maybe our next one is about Kiwanis and starting to get into getting public opinion.
So we can, and we're talking about that.
Okay, I think that's it on old business. Any other public comment on agenda items? Let's see. There's one other thing that I might possibly want to add to the agenda is we had talked earlier this year when we were electing officers about maybe mid-year, Danny taking over as chair. And we could say this for next month, or we could, do it right now, make a nomination.
And two, that is.
Yeah. So, if you guys are good, I would like to nominate Danny to take over as chair.
At the next meeting.
That's a motion.
We're just saying this right now. Everything.
Do you not want to decide it right now?
I'm just,
I'm good. Yeah, I let's see whether we wouldn't,
okay.
unless you want to think about it. or-
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about it, but I guess wanted to know the context of the switch at this time, just because we're mid-year through.
We're mid-year.
Okay.
And for other reasons, I think it
Okay.
makes sense right now.
You are both okay with this. Like I don't, like if this needs to be thought about more, but unless you both have discussed it and it's not like.
And then, we could nominate a vice chair, and it could be me or it could, if you have to ask somebody else to do it too.
Oh, you're mean. So you're looking for a second on a motion to nominate Danny as chair?
Yes, that's the first thing.
And a second?
And if you guys feel comfortable, we can wait till next month too.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing this on you.
Yeah. I do feel like a lot has been strong on us tonight. Can we wait till next month? Okay.
That's good.
Or I'm happy to do a special meeting if that's what we need to.
That's good.
But
Yeah.
It'd give you time to
Let's,
think about whether or not
thank
you
you.
wanna do it too, because that would be good.
Okay, good. We need,
Directors
do the parks, director.
Sure you guys have all read through it already, let me find it, here. Harbor Springs sent students down for an hour of volunteering at the beach yesterday. They weeded the beach, playground area. They raked the beach, picked up some trash, litter. They were awesome. So thank you to the 6th grade kids of Harbor Springs. Summer seasonal staff are in full swing, so I apologize if I've been late on emails. There's a lot going on to get them oriented and going. I'm working with Pentura to order the bike fix-it stations. And also some extra umbrellas for Marina Park. Some of them broke last year, they're a little wonky. So we're gonna order some more of those. The memorial plaques were cleaned. If anyone's walked by Zorn Fountain, they look really nice. Thank you to Parks Maintenance and DPW on that. And then all the benches along Kyle's Park are brand new. Nate and I built them last week and installed them. A couple of them, 2 of them have been donated, but they all have room for donation plaques. So those can go on at another time.
Have we found a better way to attach the plaques?
They're the nice bronze ones that are screwed in on the benches. They're not the ones like the tables. We gotta figure out another way for those tables. And maybe it is the bronze ones,
Yeah.
like the metal ones that we put in and not those plastic ones that stick on. John Cups plans on pouring the tea pads after 4th of July. We had a meeting with the Diskers to sort out how we wanted to do that and the signage. Scott coordinated with Sue West and the Marina Park tables were painted. She did an excellent
She's
job.
working on them, but the sprinklers come on every day and,
I know, yeah, she's doing her best.
but she was there today. I talked to her.
And then
It's almost done.
Janet Stewart did some edging of our gardens in Marina Park, so I want to give a shout out to her. Pickleball open house is Tuesday, June 17th, 9 to 11. Yeah, I know. We had kids registered for the birdhouse walk
Yeah.
workshop with Dawson. That was super fun. Shout out to him.
Great.
We made money on the event, not a lot, like $30, but Dawson supplied all the wood, the teaching for free, so that was fantastic. Walking club is popping. If you guys are free at 10 AM on Tuesdays. We have 9 today. Yeah, proud. And we're learning all sorts of things about the city. And then what else? Oh, and then yoga in Shea Park on Saturdays is at 9. Harbor Yoga will also be doing Zorn Park evening yoga Wednesdays, 6 to 7, also donation based.
Make sure you see you there.
Okay. I'll be in the back room.
So they've had a little wonky registration for their evening classes in the summer, so they're hoping that bringing them outside to the public and having it donation based will kind of make it more community based, and so we will support them in any way we can.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Is there somebody in charge of putting down the umbrellas at night?
Yes and no. At the beach, it's the lifeguards. At the skate park staff, it's the skate park staff. Because when they leave for the night, people put them up, put them down, and Marina Park does up the marina. If it's stormy during the day, Nate and I try and frolic down there as quickly as we can to put them down. But it's not a perfect system. The new ones are a lot sturdier. The new ones don't break nearly as, the old ones had like a cranking system that was pretty finicky. So all the ones we purchased last year, the newer kind, are still standing.
I was
Yeah.
just curious because I saw one blowing in the wind the other
So
day.
like yes and no.
I couldn't leave.
But yeah, when those storms blow through and we can't get there in time, they're just, I mean, they're umbrellas, so they kind of, but they're strapped in there good. They're not going anywhere, and I guess that's the most important part.
It's just so windy all the time now.
Yeah.
I just want to give you a shout out, Rachel, this, the amount that you've expanded the programming is really
Mhm.
impressive.
It's so
Within the
fun.
context of the year, yeah, so just to look at all the things that you have got going on. Compared to what we were doing, a year or 2 years ago, yeah, great work.
Well, open house should be great. It's gonna be coffee. water and donuts. So, we should have a pretty good turnout.
All right, anything else anybody wants to talk about tonight? Okay, meeting adjourned at 7:11.
All right.